Michele Kambolis is a Vancouver-based family therapist who launched a new advice column in the Vancouver Sun this year. She encourages you to ask her the questions you are afraid to ask, the dicey ones. She has a master's degree in counseling psychology with a specialization in art therapy. She is an artist herself, and she is a strong advocate for children and youth. It is my pleasure to welcome Michele Kambolis to Studio 4 to tell us more.
Thank you so much.
Well, congratulations on the column.
It's been so fantastic. Yeah, the response has been really strong, and we're getting letters every day, very honest letters on topics that are very difficult to answer. And so it's opened up this whole rich conversation with parents locally and actually across Canada.
I'm sure. And can you remain anonymous? or do you have to sign your name to the letter?
Well, it's interesting. Some parents will write in and say, feel free to use my whole name, and they're very happy to be forthcoming with their story, and others really hope to be anonymous because the situations are pretty gut-wrenching.
Exactly, but that said, some are kind of funny, like when your teenager walks in on you while you're having intimate relations in the bedroom without the lock on the door, and perhaps it's not with your wife or your husband because you're divorced, and oh my.
That was a difficult one, yeah. Newly divorced dad, and he'd been dating for a while, hadn't introduced any of his dates to the kids, which is the right thing to do. You want to wait until you know that it's serious. So found himself in a very, very difficult situation. 5-year-old walked in while he was in an intimate situation with his new gal, and he was completely at a loss as to how to handle it.
So what did you say? What did you tell him? What did because sometimes you encourage readers to write in what they would do, right? Is that how it works?
Yes, and I'm getting a lot of responses from other parents. So other parents are putting in their 2 cents. And in the column, we'll put a lot of feedback and information based on what other parents want to say on that matter.
Sure.
And that's been really fun. I'm hearing from other parents, grandparents, teachers, even the kids themselves. So there's a lot of wisdom to be shared,
I'm sure.
and it's happening.
Well, we had talked about this question in our story meeting yesterday, and of course everybody said, oh, it's happened to all of us. We've walked in on the parents, or, where was the lock on the door? Don't know, but, and it was interesting reaction, and everybody's go, oh, my parents? Because we all thought they didn't do it at all. Couldn't possibly be having sex.
Well, most people have a very potent memory of that discovery. And the feedback went along the lines of, why did you not have a lock on the door? But second of all, it really opens up an opportunity for a very important discussion. And it's so critical to be aware of having those discussions on an ongoing basis about sexuality, ensuring that kids know what that is about, not only from a scientific standpoint, but also from the heart, and what the impact is in terms of relationship and connection.
Right. So as a family therapist, a child therapist, when should you have that discussion? Does it depend on the child? Does it depend on the question or the circumstance? What?
As soon as there is verbal consciousness, you start to have those conversations with children so that they know the proper parts of anatomy. And that is really the beginning point and the basis of educating kids about what all of the functions of our body might be. And then as they develop and as they grow, those conversations will deepen. There's a great series of books out there on sexual health development and the importance of having very honest conversations about sexuality very young.
Well, as you know, it's usually somebody else who tells you. I don't know how it is today. I think it's better because they're telling you more in school. When I grew up, Judy Llewellyn told me on the way home from school how men and women got together. Well, of course, I thought she was lying. That couldn't possibly be the case. Well, but I didn't go home and ask my parents about it.
But it's interesting because all of the research is showing that teens and youth actually want to hear directly from their parents. They want that information. They'd like to have open dialogue and ask questions. And so it seems counterintuitive for the adult, but really what kids are saying is this: I want to know and I want to have that discussion with my mom or my dad. Otherwise, they're going to start to access that information in ways that are potentially less healthy, like their peers, like the internet.
Because as you know so well, we all want to raise a child who is sexually free and not hung up and makes smart decisions about sex and uses protection and all of that. So you need to have the discussion.
And if you're connected and you're bonded with your child and willing to talk about every aspect to life, then that's just another area to open up for conversation.
What are some of the keys to get a child, a teenager particularly, to communicate with you, to talk to you, be it about sex or about marijuana?
Yeah, it's really about finding those openings and creating such a safe space for your child that they know whatever they share, whatever they say, there isn't going to be judgment attached. There might be some problem solving and there might be some, boundaries involved, but if you're not really undermining who they are and you're respecting their point of view, then it's going to increase the likelihood that they're going to talk with you.
Right. As Dr. Daniel Siegel told us, it's important that you value the child, whether the child likes beets or not, or wants to wear a coat or not. You have to value what they're thinking.
That's just it.
And yet guide them.
And if you meet them, truly meet them where they're at, and you work at being as present as you possibly can be, and you hold that space, all kinds of conversations open up. I mean, the other thing that I encourage a great deal are those side-by-side activities. How do we find those points of interest, those activities, the play aspect of life? And Dan Siegel has that on his platter of mental health. It's essential to be able to play together. And if you're doing that, the conversations will just spontaneously arise.
That's interesting, because if you go skiing with your father or you play some tennis with your mom or something like that, you might talk about things you don't ordinarily talk about. It's almost safe because you've got a game in the middle. Maybe you're just playing cribbage. You know what I mean? It works for adults.
Yeah, and when we were young, we would just join in on whatever was happening with our parents. My dad was a race car driver.
Really?
So I spent a lot of time just hanging out with my dad in the pits at Indianapolis 500.
How great.
It was amazing. And so we would, connect on his terms, and that was fine because he was bringing me into his world. I think parenting today, we've made a shift towards only entering into the child's world, and there has to be a balance between the two.
What is the impact of social media on our kids today?
Social media, wow, yeah. Well, it runs a great deal of interference just in terms of making those connections and being conscious and being with one another. It was interesting because the other day I went to watch my son at the pool, and I saw all of these children in the pool looking up at their parents and wanting to meet their gaze, to see that their parents were watching them, that they were seen, that they were being acknowledged for all of their efforts. And there wasn't one parent that didn't have their iPhone or their BlackBerry
their
and
iPad.
Engaged in that rather than meeting the gaze of their child.
And it works the opposite. The children come to dinner and they're all playing games on their phones or computers or something like that. So I suspect at some point you have to say dinner time,
100%.
no phones at the table.
Yeah, and limits are okay. It doesn't mean it's going to interfere with your bond with your child. In fact, it's the complete opposite.
Right, and it's not that we want you to be low tech, but there still is that human connection that they're so connected and yet they're not connected at all. It's almost information overload.
Information overload and fractured attention. So it makes it very difficult to just sustain attention and maintain a conversation without the mind moving to someplace completely different. It affects brain development.
as Dr. Siegel pointed out, for sure.
Yeah.
One of the letters you received, I'm not sure when, was about a parent who had discovered marijuana in his son's drawer, or found his son smoked a little, smelled a little pot smoke, something like that. What do you do? Your teenager smoking dope.
This was a fascinating letter, and the response was very, very strong. Most parents were less concerned about the pot issue and more concerned about the fact that this parent had snooped in the bags of the kids that were in their home. So it lit up this whole moral question around snooping. But with pot use, you know, again, if you find that your child is using any kind of substance, it's an opportunity to really connect and find out what's happening for them. And you just want to know more. You want to know more about what's going on for them emotionally and with their friends. And then in the discussion, offer out information, do a little research together, find out what the real deal is in terms of the effects.
Sure, so
it's a journey together.
Maybe it's innocent. You're emptying their gym bag. Oops. Do you know what I mean? You're not even snooping. But the snooping factor is big.
It's huge.
Should you read their mail? Should you read their love letters? Should you open their mail? No.
Privacy
and yet
is
every
really
parent
important.
Has the urge to just know.
Privacy is really important, and where parents are you know, entering into that realm of snooping, it's a situation where obviously intuitively they know that something's wrong. So you do want to investigate that feeling. Parental intuition is very critical, and you have to use that as a guide. But snooping and investigating in, you know, those private areas isn't always necessary.
Well, and then how do you bring it up? Excuse me, I was going through your drawers. I found your diary and I just happened to read it.
That's it.
It would just be horrifying to a teenager.
It breaks trust.
Of course.
And once you've lost trust, you've lost a lot of ground as a parent.
So when you punish a teenager today, discipline. I know kids are not for hitting, so it's not about hitting them. What's good? Take away the computer. Grounding seems to be passé, or is it?
There's still a lot of grounding happening, that's for sure, and it becomes increasingly difficult as they get older to really put a consequence in place. Mostly, the direction is really along the lines of the breach in the trust in the relationship. So you talk about the emotional consequences and the relationship consequences of some of the choices that they're making.
And they model us. They always have. We are the examples. If mother's always on a diet, then I'm sure the teenager or the 10-year-old thinks, I better go on a diet because mom's on a diet.
That's it. Yeah. That's it. So and with consequences, certainly it still comes into play. It's still important, but far less of a factor.
Sure. So the thing is, we should be perfect parents, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's a bit of a joke. How nice to see you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm Michele Kambolis, family and child therapist, and she has a column in the Vancouver Sun.